Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Sustainable Commodities podcast, a podcast to help people navigate the ever-changing world of sustainability and sustainable commodities. I'm Barnaby Patchett, MD of 199 Agency, a marketing agency working in sustainability, and with me is my co-host,
Judith Murdoch from Murdoch Associates, working in forest risk commodities.
And in this episode, we're joined by Michelle Desilets. Michelle is the founder and executive director of the Orangutan Land Trust. Michelle's an extremely influential international spokesperson for the orangutan and a key player in the campaign for sustainable palm oil, who spent a career tirelessly campaigning for sustainable solutions for the long-term survival of the orangutan in the wild. And this episode, it's going to be a little different from the series so far, where we've focused on the EUDR, while we'll be touching on upcoming deforestation legislation. We're going to have a wider conversation about the impact of palm oil on orangutans and forests, and the sustainable palm oil movement as a whole.
So, Michelle, welcome. You're our first NGO in this series, and I would like to just start off with that question. How do you think the EUDR will affect your work in the field with orangutans and orangutans in general and wildlife?
I think it's definitely a positive step. It's a step in the right direction, a significant one as well, if it succeeds. I suppose I have some apprehensions about the readiness of companies to comply, their ability to put into practice the requirements of geolocations and so forth on complex supply chains, such as the palm oil supply chain. But as far as for orangutans and tropical rainforest, to me it's quite profound that we've got here at last, and I'm hoping that this legislation will also impact emerging legislation in, say, California, New York, and the Forest Act in the U.S., and legislation here in the U.K. To follow and perhaps even be more robust and comprehensive in the commodities it covers. For the orangutan, it's going to be a real vital component in their survival, and it's an opportunity for collaboration between producer countries and consumer the buying countries of palm oil, as well as the NGOs, the scientists, the companies themselves engaged in the supply chain, to really deliver some lasting solutions for tropical rainforest and for biodiversity such as the orangutan.
Okay. And do you, I guess the bit, when you get it down to being really practical, and, when I've spoken to you before, it's also trying to create wildlife corridors and allow orangutans to be able to move about. Do you think that by this practical view of having the geolocations, that will help on a real practical level, because you'll know where you will have some understanding where animals are, because you can perhaps see the pockets and different things? Do you think that is going to be really helpful to their survival too?
Yeah, I think there should certainly be some data-driven value to this, the geolocations and overlaying layers of where we know orangutans to be, where we know trouble spots to be. But remember, a lot of the work that we're doing is, considering that most orangutans live outside of protected areas, and they're living in these fragmented landscapes, and fragmented by oil palm, mining, other uses. We know that the orangutans are moving through these areas, and so the presence of an orangutan does not exclude the potential for sustainable palm oil to be in that same region, so to speak, working with companies that are developing these wildlife corridors, whether that's a linear corridor, allowing for continuous movement of large animals such as orangutans or elephants, or even a stepping stone where the animal knows where the next patch of forest is, and the companies operating these regions work in a way that they do not allow the capture or harm of these species, allow them to move freely. That is like the key strategy for the survival of these most at-risk orangutans. So yes, there's that benefit to having those layers and understanding the real biodiversity that's on the ground and the risk associated with it. But it leads me on to say that EUDR in itself is not going to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. Okay, we need to see companies, both producer companies and consumer companies, putting some support towards such conservation efforts, such as these wildlife corridors or restoration of perhaps aging oil palm or other degraded areas. And for example, on the WWF Palm Oil Buyer Scorecard, you see that the companies are graded not only on their sourcing of sustainable palm oil, but whether they're contributing to smallholder, support or supporting conservation activities in the regions where they're buying. So we need to go beyond just sustainable sourcing. We need kind of some remediation and prevention kind of conservation support to really give the future back to these species.
Yeah,
I guess the orangutan and palm oil are almost inextricably linked in terms of the public's perception on palm oil. In terms of the kind of public perception is in lots of cases that we should go palm free. Could you explain why that's a bad idea and why NGOs like yours don't support kind of boycotts?
Yes, I should start by saying that it's absolutely 100% true that conventionally produced palm oil has been absolutely catastrophic for orangutans and the rainforest habitat. And this is why it's caught that. We were part of the people who put out the first reports 20 odd years, about 20 years ago now. We helped organize some of the first reports revealing some of these impacts. And so, yes, the orangutan has been a figurehead for all that's wrong with palm oil, but we've worked very hard to show that there's potential for good, that sustainable palm oil can actually benefit orangutans, as I just described in these fragmented landscapes, essentially providing safe havens, connectivity. So back to your question is, why do we not support palm-free or a blanket boycott on products? I could go on for quite a long time, but the consensus among wildlife conservation NGOs, social NGOs as well, and in particular orangutan NGOs, is that it is no solution. In fact, it could be counterproductive to the aims of protecting orangutans. Mm-hmm. For example, if we were globally to switch to alternative oils, these alternative oils, as the IUCN recent report has shown, have far lower yields, and the replacement of oil palm would require such large areas of land that we would be shifting the problem elsewhere, or even exacerbating it in the regions where it's already bad. So switching oil palm to another crop in Indonesia would mean potentially more deforestation, more risk to the orangutan. We think it's better to, as consumers, for example, and as well as companies who are purchasing edible oils such as palm oil, that by demanding sustainable palm oil, we have the leverage to really change how this product is produced on the ground. And by doing so, we can help protect wildlife. We like to say that basically the single most important thing that we can all do to save the orangutan, and we can do it every day, is demanding the sustainable production and consumption of palm oil.
Yeah. And I think you must feel quite proud because you've been involved with the RSPO, and I know that you've worked on many working groups. And the fact that the RSPO is now seen at the forefront of the forest risk commodities in the way that it's organising itself. There's been a recent delay in the what was the 2018 principles and criteria. When do you see the new version coming out, and have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, so it's actually the 2023 principles and criteria that we were aiming to get out. I was part of the principles criteria review task force, as I was in 2018 and also in 2013. So I've been through the evolution of the standard. We hit some stumbling blocks at the 11th hour in our work in the task force, which was very thorough, I must say. It wasn't through lack of will in any part. And so the process meant that it had to go back to the steering committee and so forth. I just recently had a meeting, and, I can confirm that the new draft of the P&C will be presented for public consultation globally. Once again, hopefully before the annual roundtable meeting in November, and then hopefully again at that point the membership can vote to adopt the new P&C. From that point, it will be 1 year of how do you say it? That 1 year before they have to demonstrate compliance.
Yeah. Talking about the RSPO and certification as a whole, how does this fit into the whole picture in terms of both sustainable palm oil, but also in terms of your work with orangutans?
Well, RSPO has come a long way. Certification by the RSPO, I think, under the 2018 P&C and now hopefully also the 2023 P&C, is quite robust and comprehensive. That said, RSPO is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect, and it can't fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, certification is an essential component of sustainable palm oil. And also, I always like to point out that the work, the kind of pioneering work that the RSPO started to do 20 years ago, and as it's evolved, and it's evolved quite quickly, has led the way to other commodities developing similar standards of certification. So that kind of impact has been profound. For my work, again, yes, it's been an essential component, but it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Mm-hmm.
Remembering that sustainable palm oil, the global production of sustainable palm oil is only 19% or thereabouts. 19% of global production of palm oil is certified sustainable by the RSPO, and that figure hasn't shifted in a long time, and that's regrettable.
Mm-hmm.
We really need to see sustainable palm oil become the norm, so that we don't just push the problem from, here's a good plantation, but the poor players continue to run amok. Hoping also that, RSPO, we know RSPO has led to the emergence of national mandatory kinds of standards for sustainable palm oil, such as the MSPO, Malaysia's Sustainable Palm Oil, and ISPO, Indonesia's
Mm-hmm.
Sustainable Palm Oil. While not as robust, perhaps, as RSPO, they are mandatory. And if they are properly managed and audited, that could really raise the floor, so to speak, while RSPO continues to raise the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And we can just hopefully level out the playing field. Again, with the EUDR regulation, that's leveling out the playing field downstream a bit. and leveling it out in the producer countries, it will mean a landscape that is much more amenable for wildlife.
Yeah. And certainly Indonesia and Malaysia, those certifications are quite crucial, I think. And I think that perhaps the move in Indonesia in particular, the declining in deforestation must be something that cheers you at least. I mean, I think the main message is that deforestation still continues, but certainly we are seeing that decline in Indonesia.
That's right. The research has shown like a very significant and steady decline over the past 5 or 6 years, reaching in 2022 the lowest level since 1990. Those levels of deforestation for palm oil, I should clarify. And different experts have looked at why this might be. Part of it might be, could surely be due to the moratorium that was placed on new plantations in forested areas. I think we can give some credit to RSPO for some of that reduction, and to the NGOs, etc. Now in 2023, there's been a bit of an uptick, and again, this first part of 2024, we're seeing a little bit of an increase, but still nowhere near the levels that we, the rate of increase that we were seeing in previously.
Yeah. And I think also the word you just used there, the deforestation linked to palm oil, for palm oil, is quite crucial, because I think I would like to just highlight again, I know that things like dams been built or mining or other crops, that's a lot of what some of our listeners might forget at times, that they just focus perhaps on, it's palm oil or other forestry commodities. What are the biggest significant issues in deforestation, do you think, in Indonesia, Malaysia and other parts of the world, in areas where people don't think about it, particularly around dams? I think would be one that I'd just like to highlight, because I know that was affecting some groups of orangutans.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. So what we're saying, we have a couple of situations. So the first situation, referring to the dams, a hydroelectric dam proposed with Chinese investment, and also, interestingly, Scottish investment. Right. And so this is in Sumatra and in the Batang Toru region, which is home to the rarest and most endangered of the great apes, the newly identified in the past 5 years, Tapanuli species of orangutan. There's only about 800 of them in the world, and their landscape is due to be kind of cut in half. Yeah, in a way. There's going to be this huge barrier right in the middle of it of a hydroelectric dam. So there's a lot of campaigning going on to try to rethink that scenario and see if we can save the Tapanuli orangutan from extinction. There's also mining. Mining has been taking place in Borneo, especially Kalimantan, for quite a long time. But now we see, especially in East Kalimantan, the eastern part of Borneo, a huge increase in nickel mining, other kinds of mining as well, but nickel especially. And of course, that nickel is what's going in to run our green EV cars. So there's a bit of it's an irony, I suppose.
Yeah.
And my colleagues, we support a small grassroots organization working to pick up and translocate orangutans and other wildlife that are in critical risk areas in East Kalimantan. And they've said to me, Michelle, palm oil is no longer the problem out here. I mean, that's come and, they've done what they've done, but it's not, increasing. What's really, most of the rescues and most of the degradation is due to nickel mining and other mines, and the images that they've shown of orangutans walking along the mining roads and big lorries trundling past and the landscape looking almost lunar. It's heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching in the way that the early pictures of the palm oil boom in central Kalimantan was in the mid-2000s.
Yeah. I think that's so important to highlight because, again, we've been fighting in this space for sustainable palm oil. And I certainly think that people choose to just have one image of what's the problem, but it's multiple. Everything we touch in human life, and it's very interesting for you to highlight nickel. And as you say, what is seen as green, how much damage it can be doing. And also interesting to know that there seems to be Scottish investment, which is almost horrific to hear that there is some kind of investment from this country into a dam that is going to cause so much destruction. And yet, what is our government doing about it? Or is it even being considered in some of the new regulations? So a very interesting point to bring up there.
I was going to say there's also mining issues in Batang Toru region. If I can say, if you look at the Mighty Earth campaign for the Tapanuli orangutan, they're doing the most, progressive work there. And there's been some recent articles in the Scottish press about the part that Scotland plays in the future of the Tapanuli orangutan.
Right.
Talking about the legislation, going back to that a little bit, we've talked about EUDR and its potential, the potential benefits of it, but obviously that only covers one market. What about the need for kind of other legislation to kind of complement that and to level the playing field, as it were, kind of globally? What needs to happen?
Well, as an American by birth, I'm a very apprehensive of the forthcoming election in America because I fear that the Forest Act could be lost. I'm really hoping that whatever happens in America, that a focus on the America's impact on global forest can be addressed. Hopefully also, the New York and California legislation will proceed apace and set some examples as to what can be achieved there. I've not heard any talk of similar legislation in Australia or New Zealand, but of course also here in the UK. There's been discussions and movement towards similar legislation, but it's not been fulfilled. DEFRA has not done their bit, kind of thing. But I can't talk in any great detail on that.
No, the UK DD, I think we're all still in the dark about what that's going to look like. And I guess as we record now, they've just announced the general election. I guess we're not going to hear anything until that's all over.
Exactly. Yeah. So a similar situation as the U.S. is, the results of the election could have impact one way or another on emerging legislation that would benefit wildlife and forest.
In terms of the kind of going beyond the West, as it were, what about legislation the sort of globally in terms of two of the other big markets for palm, China and India? Because one of the risks we've heard about from some people on this podcast, some people believe that all we're going to do is create a sort of two-tier market in terms of the EU is going to be the premium certified sustainable product, and actually just the conventional is just going to continue to be sold in Asia.
Yes, that remains a fear. It certainly does. Yes, as you say, China, India, and in fact Indonesia, domestic demand is, I think, second, isn't it? As far as national demand for palm oil, and these areas are lacking in both corporate and governmental will for sustainable supply chains. I know the RSPO especially has been working very hard in India and China to, increase membership in the RSPO, to do outreach, and to some degree with success. But my goodness, they're such huge markets. How do you even, have any impact on there? So yes, I think these remain huge challenges. I've noticed actually quite a lot of noise in the media from India, both social media and traditional media, about palm oil and health, and some rather unfounded allegations as to the negative impacts of palm oil on health. And I think there's a movement for palm oil free that I'm seeing in India. I can't say definitively just how huge this is based on these supposed health issues, which again just takes away the discussion entirely from the potential for sustainable supply chains. And if they're switching to other oils. So the focus, what I guess I'm getting down to is the discussion on sustainability of any commodity, and particularly palm oil, is quite lacking in these regions. And I think every effort should be made by engaged stakeholders to, build up the awareness and need for that. And hopefully somewhere down the line, we can see some legislation coming out of these countries that will at least start to approach the EUDR.
Yeah, and it was interesting you were talking about New York and California. I hadn't realised that there was separate legislation for them. And, hopefully if the election in the US goes in the wrong direction, these states will still continue with that.
Yes, that's what one would hope.
Yeah. And is it very similar? I saw that the Forest Act was about illegal sources of... Yeah, so similar.
It was, but I was part of a group that was, talking about how we push it to be, far beyond illegal sources. The early days of EUDR, I think they were just talking about illegal, and it didn't take too much to convince people that illegal does not mean, or legal does not equate to ethical. So that work still needs to be done with the Forest Act. I'm not sure what I haven't looked lately what the state of the California and New York bills are. It's a space to return to and watch, I suppose, and see what happens. So again, no expert there, but these are where I'm hearing things, positive things being discussed and might be the way forward. As a California girl myself, I hold a lot of hope that California will lead the way.
Yeah.
As it does do on most of these pieces of environmental legislation. But the message, I guess, is that, both the US and UK need to at least sort of match EUDR if we're going to have, a further impact.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
But then again, if we're talking about EU companies, well, a lot of them are going to be global, aren't they? Multinational, at least. So if they're putting their cards in line for the European market, one would hope that that will, be seen for all of their markets. And then again, that has the kind of pressure and leverage, to fill some of that space in these other markets.
So it becomes the de facto international standard.
Exactly. Right. That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah.
Yeah. I've certainly heard somebody speaking recently as well around the, when you're trying to prove something is illegal, how on earth do you prove it is illegal? It's not that straightforward because you're looking for someone to have done something wrong. But that just led me to the point that you have sat on the RSPO complaints panel for some time. Could you just talk a little bit about what you do and how you feel that how much stick you've got with that, or is it a lot more carrot?
Well, it's getting that balance right, and that's the real challenge. So, but the grievance process of the RSPO is one of the hallmarks of a good certification system. So you can lay out all the rules you like in the standard, but if you don't have a way to deal with the rogues and laggards and non-compliant members, then they mean nothing. So that grievance, it's a cornerstone of assurance, really. A cornerstone, I suppose. Something might have 8 corners if it's a cube. Anyway, and so in the complaints panel, yes, we look at any allegation, and if that allegation, we say, if this were proved to be true, would it be in contravention of any of the key documents of the RSPO, including the standard and code of conduct, and level investigation might be involved. Engaging both the respondent and complainant. It can take a long time to reach a conclusion, but ultimately we look for solutions rather than just to say, "Oh, there's a problem here. We'll kick this member off and be done with it." Because again, as soon as you kick them off the RSPO, you have no leverage. They're out of the game. They have no reason then to perform sustainably whatsoever. Except for perhaps national standards. So it's not to say that we forgive mistakes made. Sanctions can be very robust, and even a temporary suspension of membership or certification can have huge impacts on a company in the marketplace, right? And
reputational damage.
Reputational damage as well as buyers. A company goes wrong and a multinational will delist, will say, "We're not sourcing you from any." They've lost their major contracts and so forth. So that's a huge deterrent to doing it wrong in the first place. And it's a huge incentive to putting things right very quickly. So the threat of suspension or termination, whilst those are the last things that we generally want to do, unless it's a really gross non-compliance, like murdering orangutans willy-nilly, let's say, and they should never have been a member in the first place. Fine, let's get rid of those actors. But where there is room for putting things right, remediation, etc., then we see that as the way forward. But it is tricky. It's like, how much carrot, how much stick? And the reputation of the RSPO and all of its members rides on the decisions of the complaints panel.
But you need to have...
Have we been tough enough? Have we really identified the problems? Have we given them a slap on the wrist? And we do get called under criticism. Some of it perhaps valid. The time, historically, the complaints took a very, very long time to resolve, but since the emergence of a complaints and appeals procedure a few years ago, that average time per complaint has really dropped significantly, and successful closures of complaints has increased, and it's become a much more efficient and reliable system.
How long does it take typically?
I think in our latest meeting it was about 200 and something days, so two-thirds of a year. But previously it was over a year and a half sometimes, and that could be down to just getting documentation from respondents and complainants in a timely manner to support the allegations. And a lot of it has been down to when things have held up by legal. Like we can't make a decision until the courts have made a decision on component X, Y, and Z. And that has really if you can imagine, Indonesian law courts are not really quick off the mark, for example.
And you have to work out if there is, I guess, a reasonable path to redemption.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
What it should look like.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the post-complaint monitoring. So, again, if they fail to deliver on that, then the risk is high yet again.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to get another chance.
But it's a good source of information for people for their due diligence, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a very transparent grievance system. You can go to the RSPO case tracker, so you can look at the historic complaints against any company and how they've been resolved, or if they've been kicked off. You can look at existing complaints against companies, and I would say go to that before you go to the reports in the newspapers or something, because the reports in the newspapers, we have found, have not always had the right information. There was a report just last week that said such and such has been a member of the RSPO despite deforestation. No, they haven't been a member. They've never been a member. So yeah, just a good cross-reference is the case tracker. And also the relationship of parent companies and groups and so forth can be a little bit hard to navigate. The RSPO membership desk can always help to say if this smaller company is part of a larger membership of RSPO or not.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, actually, because it's so difficult to see it all and understand it all. So yeah, no, that's really a handy hint. Yeah. I think one question or sort of one of my final questions is, we often talk about deforestation and measure things about deforestation, stopping deforestation, zero deforestation, but we don't talk about restoration enough. And you touched on some of the projects that you're doing, or at least been able to sponsor through the Orangutan Land Trust. What do you think about reforestation and how much more we should be doing? And is that really what we should be driving buyers of palm oil and consumers to be doing, is to restore forest?
I think it's both. I think in the first place, the goal is to stop deforestation, right? We can't continue to deforest and say, well, we can always reforest it later. That's not the solution, because as I explained, our colleagues are translocating animals, and that's not like always the best plan of action. We try to keep the animals where they are if they can survive, but they're in places where they simply cannot survive and they have to be translocated. So where do you translocate them? To another forest. How safe is that forest? Well, yeah. So it's very problematic to just say we can deforest today and reforest tomorrow. But reforestation, there's been a lot of damage done. These regions are so fragmented by multiple uses, and animals live in these genetically isolated pockets that will mean that they're not viable populations in the long term. And so scientifically backed, well thought out reforestation, restoration projects have shown great impact in the Kinabatangan region in Sabah in Malaysia. The Pongo Alliance initiative that we created some years ago worked with some of the largest palm oil growers, producers out there, NGOs and scientists. And in the Kinabatangan region, where orangutans are really fragmented, the Pongo Alliance worked with a company there to take aging oil palm, retired oil palm, if you will, and put these big marcottes on it, these like, almost like grafting young figs to the aging oil palm. And these figs would grow very quickly and provide a kind of skeletal structure upon which natural as well as human provided reforestation could occur. And of course, the fig is a favorite fruit of so many species, the hornbill and the orangutan and so forth, and they're natural seed dispersers. So a very successful project providing the connectivity there, and similar efforts in Ketapang and West Kalimantan. There's even a company, a grower in West Kalimantan, that they're actively keeping over 100 orangutans thriving within their oil palm estate by maintaining and enhancing a forested area for them. So that it's actually been a safe haven for orangutans within the concession boundaries, whereas outside the concession boundaries, there's no such efforts being made. And East Kalimantan, we're working on reforestation efforts in areas degraded by oil palm. Our friends over at Sumatran Orangutan Society, some years ago, started restoring an disused oil palm plantation. And within a couple of years, their camera traps were already catching orangutans moving back into this area far sooner than any of the scientists had anticipated. The restoration was that quick and efficient that nature just took its course eventually and returned. And so the results can be very exciting. And that's again where we call on people, stakeholders in deforestation risk commodities to go beyond ensuring that their ingredients are deforestation free, but maybe putting back something into conservation for the damage done in previous years.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. Really good to hear. Positive.
Yeah, I think
and just
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Just contact Judith or me at Orangutan Land Trust to find out about opportunities to support such efforts. And to add that we are backed by like a most formidable scientific advisory board. So all of our work and strategies is backed by sound science and data and so forth to hopefully provide the best outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I should maybe add at this point that I am a trustee of the Orangutan Land Trust, and didn't introduce that. But
sorry, I kind of exposed you there. Sorry,
I did. You did, but definitely
conflict of interest.
Yeah, but definitely, there's so many great projects, and it's easy to get involved. That's the message: easy to get involved.
And so just to wrap up, because I think that's a really nice, positive way to end. What does the future look like for the orangutan?
Well, I have to remain positive, otherwise I won't have anything to live for. It's been a roller coaster journey over the past 3 decades that I've been doing this, and I'm feeling more positive now than I have in the past. Let's put it that way. My positivity has increased remarkably. We know that the orangutan populations in these, national parks and protected areas is relatively stable. So they're not going to go extinct anytime soon, despite what some people might want to tell you. But the challenge remains those tens of thousands of orangutans in unprotected areas. While I'm positive, the challenges do remain profound, and there's a lot of attention to a lot of crises, humanitarian, political, climate crises, etc., around the world. The biodiversity crisis, I think, surmounts so many. It's a cornerstone of life on Earth, I think. And I think we need to put more attention in all of our behaviors, consumption, production, etc., to consider the impacts on biodiversity if we're really to save the orangutan and other wildlife in the long term.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us, and thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Sustainable Commodities podcast.